When I hit the bed at the end of the day and my head hits the pillow, I ask myself just a really simple question. Do I like how I showed up today? And if the answer is yes, I have to ask why. What did I do? How did I show up? How did I behave? How did I engage with other people? How did they respond to me that I could answer yes to, do I like how I showed up today? And if the answer is no, I have to go through that same inquiry. Why is it no? What didn't I do or what did I do that I can't say, yes, I enjoyed, I'm happy with how I showed up today? So profoundly simple. And it starts with each of us setting that intention before we go to bed at night. Who do I want to be tomorrow? Waking up in the morning and making that conscious decision. I'm going to take my whole self to work. And when we look back through human history, there have been three things that have always been the drivers of change: demographics, technology, and Mother Nature. If we go back, I mean, just thinking, the creation of the wheel, that was technology. The computer system, technology. The internet, technology. All of those things have been driving human behavior, have been affecting our lives. And unfortunately, what we're experiencing is the speed of change, because of the acceleration of the technology, is having a huge impact on each of us. And it's impacting Mother Nature. So historically, humans were migrating as the weather changed, as climate changed, as the seasons changed, but it's having a huge effect on our lives today in ways we can't even begin to fathom. And we're just getting started. When you look at the scientific data and what's going to likely happen over the next 10 or 20 years, it's scary as hell. And then looking at demographics. If we look at historically in the workplace, it was white men. And we look at the workplace today, it's a beautiful rainbow. All of those people are bringing all of their talents, all of their life experience, all of their perspectives around product design, around customer interactions, around new processes, new ways of doing business. It's a beautiful thing. And our organizations are benefiting from that. Our society is benefiting from it. But for each of us personally, it's incredibly painful to feel the change. Whether it's from Mother Nature, from the demographics, from technology, we're all being impacted by it. And how do we deal with it? What do we do? What's the answer? What's the solution? What's the magic bullet? In all of my life experience, and all of my research, and all of the work I've been doing for decades, the one and only thing I've found that is the solution is what I call conscious leadership. So there's been an absolutely amazing amount of research that's been done in the last 15 or 20 years about the human brain. It's incredible what we know now. There's so much more we don't know, but there's an amazing amount that we know now about the human brain. We actually have three brains in our skull. We have the reptilian brain, the amygdala. We have the mammalian brain that's shared with all the mammals. And we have the prefrontal cortex, the human brain. And the body gets hit with about 12 million pieces of information every single second. And most of that information doesn't actually make it to the brain. There's about 4,000 of those 12 million pieces of information that hit the human brain. And of those 4,000, most of those get processed by the amygdala. A few more get processed by the mammalian brain, and very few actually make it to the prefrontal cortex, the human brain. Our amygdala was hardwired, it is hardwired to protect us, to keep us safe in the world. But through evolution, we're not living in the world we used to live in, where we had to worry about being clubbed, being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, being attacked by a bear. But our body is still reacting to that because that's what our amygdala does. It keeps us safe. That's its job. And we're all alive because of it. But we don't have those same kinds of threats in our house, hopefully. We don't have those same kinds of threats in the workplace, hopefully. But we're still allowing our amygdala to make decisions for us. And when our amygdala is making those decisions, we're either in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Either we're looking to attack somebody or push back verbally or physically, or we're looking for the exit door and get out as soon as possible, or we just freeze and stand in place. We shut our mouth. We don't say anything. And each of us as leaders have a choice in how we show up. We can show up with our amygdala in charge, and we're constantly reacting to all of the people around us, the tweets, the email notes, the phone calls, the texting, etc. Or we can move that information into our prefrontal cortex, the human brain, and we can make a choice. We can respond. Maybe it's taking a breath. Maybe it's a pause. Maybe it's recognizing all of those thoughts and all of those things we want to say or we want to do, and just pausing for a second to say, that's my amygdala talking. I don't want to talk to my amygdala. Let me take this to my prefrontal cortex. Let me take this to my human brain. When I get up in the morning, I have a series of practices. I have a series of things I do. But one of the first things I do is to set an intention for my day. How do I want my day to be? What am I intending? Not a goal, not a to-do list, not a list of things I'm going to do, but what is my intention on how I'm going to be, how I'm going to show up? How are other people going to experience me? It's a really simple, yet incredibly elegant thing to do. To say, this is how I intend to be today. Then I immediately will go to my morning practices of contemplation. For some folks, it's prayer. For some, it's a walk in nature. For some, it's meditation. But connecting with me, connecting with the universe, and being really clear about I'm in my body. I want to be in my body. I want to let go of all of this stuff that could get in the way of me having the day that I intended to be. Physical activity, physical practice is important. Some folks, it's yoga, Pilates, maybe a run, maybe it's time in the weight room. But spending some time with you before you engage and you start your day and connecting to your body is a really important practice. For me, I love hiking. If I'm not out in nature every morning for at least 45 minutes in a hike, I'm not having the kind of day that I want to have. And as I'm getting ready to go to work, I'm consciously thinking and making choices about who I'm going to be that day. I'm consciously making choices about how I want to show up. I'm not just going through the routine of brushing my teeth, combing my hair, showering, dressing, having breakfast, and out the door, but I'm trying to be present. I'm trying to be immensely grateful that I woke up today, that I'm alive, that I get to experience the world and benefit from the joy of being alive and having that sense of gratitude. And when I'm doing my morning meditation, I have compassion for anybody I know, which is everybody, who's suffering. It's a human condition. It's unavoidable. It comes with the job of being alive. And also being very intentional about being centered, being grounded, being present, and going into my day, into my life, into my routine as the best possible me. And I bring that into the workplace. I bring that into the people I work with. and I can be a shining beacon of what's possible. And if they're vacillating through their moments throughout the day of the 4 states of consciousness, and I'm doing the same, I can at least stop myself. I can be present to where I am and ask that question. Where am I? Is this where I want to be? Without judgment, without making myself wrong, is this where I want to be showing up from? And then move to where I want to be, where I stated, I intended I wanted to be, and continue to demonstrate, to role model, to be there for people so they're experiencing me in the way I want them to, being very intentional about that. And if it's appropriate, and if they're open to it, then having a conversation to say, when you said that, when you did this, when I observed a particular action or behavior, or got a text or an email note or a phone call from you, this was my experience. Was that what you intended? Without judgment, without making them wrong, but helping them be aware, because maybe they weren't aware, maybe they weren't conscious of how their action could impact others. And through that inquiry, through that process, once again, without judgment, without making them wrong, it's an invitation. So for 66 million years, the Earth's atmosphere had between 260 and 280 parts per million of CO2. Starting in 1880 with the industrial age, humanity started pumping more and more CO2 into the atmosphere. And in the last century, we went from 260, 280 parts per million for 66 million years to 350 parts per million. And that resulted in the Earth's atmosphere increasing by 1 degree on average. In this century alone, we're only in 2019, we've continued to pump more and more CO2 into the atmosphere. We're now at 410 parts per million. And if we stay on the trajectory we're on, we're going to hit 450 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere by 2030. And that's going to increase the Earth's atmosphere an additional 1 degree. And once we hit 2 degrees, and we hit 450 parts per million, we've hit a tipping point. It's a point of no return. All of the indicators are on red, and we're not doing anything about it. The speed of change is happening so quickly. The enormity of it is unbelievable. The impact it's having on our lives is maddening. What do we do about it? How do we deal with it? How do we make sense of it? What's going on? How do we stay sane? The one and only solution I've found in all of my work experience, in all of the research, and everything I've done is what I call conscious leadership. So, do you own your money, or does your money own you? Each of us spend most of our waking hours working for money. And what are we going to do with it? Do you want your life, or do you want your money? What value do you place on money? And is it appropriate? Does it work for you? Is your money working for you, or are you working for your money? How are you spending your money? We all think about how are we spending our money. We spend all of our time, at least our waking hours, at work. And we're working because we're worried about money. The question I have for you is, how are you spending your life? All of our thoughts, all of our feelings, all of our beliefs, all of our life experience affect and impact how we show up as a leader. Everything, every part of us shows up in the way we behave, the way that we lead. And if we don't know what we believe, if we don't know what we think, if we're not aware of how we impact people, if we don't know how we show up, then we're on remote control as leaders. We're showing up as a robot. We're showing up at the mercy and the influence and all of the systems that impacted our belief systems and how we see the world. And every single person who works for us is at the mercy of those belief systems, of those behaviors, of those actions. Is it any wonder that you're getting the results that you're getting? When are you going to ask yourself, what do I believe and why do I believe it?
The invitation.
Okay. So when we're in that moment, when we're trying to make a decision about am I going to react or am I going to respond to this situation, their body is picking that up. And as a result, our body is picking that up. And there's this whole exchange that's happening before any words are being shared, before any actions are being taken. And as that additional information is coming into our body, we're storytellers. As human beings, that's what we do. We're narrating the story of our life. So in that moment, our brain is in overdrive, writing this whole story about what's going to happen. And usually that story that's being written is reinforcing, I need to go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. I need to react. My amygdala is telling me, my reptilian brain is telling me, be afraid, be very afraid. And their body is picking up on that. And their amygdala, their reptilian brain is telling them, be afraid, be very afraid. And then our body's picking up what their body's sending us. And it just gets escalated. And no words have been spoken. Their body is sending all kinds of signals, body language, facial expressions, even if they're nanosecond facial expressions, our body is so wired to be picking up all of that information. And it's amazing what our bodies are able to pick up and do. But we've got this thing, this prefrontal cortex, the human brain, that can override it. And we have a choice. So thank you all for being here. I really am delighted to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you today about something that's near and dear to my heart. And that is the state of our organizations, the state of the workplace, the state of our lives. So each of us, and I want you to think for a moment to this morning when you were waking up. And just think about what was happening in your head as you were starting to remove the covers and get out of bed. What were your first thoughts? What was going through your head? What were you thinking about? I suspect that you were thinking about, oh yeah, it's a work day. I've got to go to work. And as you got out of bed, maybe you went into the bathroom, maybe you were taking a shower, getting dressed, brushing your teeth, thinking about what you were going to have for breakfast, but consciously or subconsciously, you were thinking about going to work. Even if you work from home, you were thinking about, who am I going to be today? And we all do it, consciously and subconsciously. And as we're going through that thought process, we're thinking, which parts of me can't I take to work? Which parts of me do I have to remove? Which parts of me do I have to leave behind? Which parts of me is it not safe to bring to the workplace? And so as we're going through our morning ritual, our morning routine, and getting ready to go to work, and showing up in the workplace, as we walk through the door, whether it's our home office, or the coffee shop where we work out of, or our car door because we're driving to an appointment, or actually walking into the office space, we've left 40, 50, 60% of us behind. And you know what? Every single person we're working with, our colleagues, our customers, our suppliers, they've all left 40, 50, 60% of themselves behind too. So is it a surprise that we've got dysfunctional workplaces? Is it surprising that when we leave at the end of the day, we're exhausted? Is it surprising that we don't feel engaged? Is it surprising that we're thinking about a new job? Maybe it's not the job. Maybe it's not our employer. Maybe it's we have to accept responsibility for our mindset about, do I really have to unpack parts of myself? Do I have to leave parts of me behind? What would happen if I showed up as my whole self? So I suspect our colleagues would be surprised, like, who the hell are you? And I suspect that you would probably have a very different experience at work. And I'm guessing that if you show up as your whole self, you're probably going to have a lot more fun. You're going to be more engaged. You're probably going to be more productive. You're going to do your best work. And you know what? Maybe you'll discover that it's not the place where you need to be. Maybe you need to be working someplace else that brings you joy, that brings out the best you possible. And it's possible that your colleagues will go with you and you'll all go and start a new business or go work someplace else. Who knows? But I would encourage each of you to be thinking about when you're waking up in the morning, or even better yet, before you go to bed the night before. And you set that intention. Who do I want to be when I wake up in the morning? Who do I want to be when I go to work? How do I want to be showing up in the workplace? How do I want to be showing up in the world? And recognize we're all human beings, not human doing. So how am I being? How are other people experiencing me? How am I experiencing them? And when I'm experiencing them, is that just a story I've made up about them because of bad past encounters with them or good past encounters with them? Or is that really them? And what have I done about it? Have I had an honest conversation to say, I'm experiencing you this way in a non-judgmental, not making them wrong, but just saying, here's how I'm experiencing you. Is that what you intended? And in having that conversation, it creates vulnerability, it creates connection, it creates community, and it provides an opportunity for an honest dialogue as two human beings who genuinely care about each other. And it can elevate them, it can elevate you, it can elevate the employment culture that you're working in. It can create opportunities for a whole new way of being in the workplace for you, for your colleagues, and organizations who foster that kind of environment, that kind of communication. What we find is they actually have better results. They make more money, they have a higher retention rate of their workforce, people feel more engaged, more productive, more valued, and they have a bigger contribution to the communities they work in. It's amazing, and yet it's so profoundly simple. And it starts with each of us setting that intention before we go to bed at night. Who do I want to be tomorrow? Waking up in the morning and making that conscious decision. I'm going to take my whole self to work. So why do we have so many startups in the world today? Why are there so many organizations that have been created in the last couple of decades? There are a number of explanations for it. One certainly is, and the most important, is that the barriers to entry to starting a company have fallen. Whether we're talking about the internet, access to capital through the various means, credit cards, PayPal, sorry.
It's okay, you're doing great.
Venmo.
Online resources.
Yeah. So when we think about starting a company today, and we think about what's necessary to start a business, so many of the barriers to entry have fallen. It's easy enough now through Google Suites to have the IT infrastructure that you need for communicating and sharing information. Through PayPal, through crowdfunding, through friends and family rounds of funding, credit cards, you have access to financial capital to start your business. The internet has given us the opportunity to get lots of information on competitors and the marketplace and what's happening. So the historic hard things about starting a business have become much easier. But with that in mind, why do so many startups fail? It's not because they don't have a good strategy. It's not that they don't have access to talent. It's not that they don't have access to capital. It's not that they don't have what they need. in terms of the resources that are necessary. The piece that's oftentimes missing, particularly in the leadership of the organization, is the softer skills, the human interaction, the understanding of what is necessary to engage and drive human behavior, to get people excited about being an ambassador for the organization, for wanting to be a cheerleader for what you're doing, to show up as their highest and best self. That soft stuff is the hardest stuff of being a leader. The historic hard stuff of having the resources has actually become really easy. The barriers to entry have fallen. But I encourage every single leader I work with to work on their soft skills: communication, human interaction, intention, how they're showing up, self-awareness, being an effective and conscious leader. That's foundational in the world today. If you're going to have a successful business, if you're going to be a successful leader, you have to be present to the people who are working with and around you. You have to show up in as your highest and best self. And it's only by being present, conscious as a leader, will people want to follow you. Will they want to volunteer? Will they want to go beyond what's expected and what's required of them to get stuff done? I'm going to start by revealing a dirty secret that you all know, whether you've thought about it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not, and that each of you has a bargain, a contract with your board of directors, with your shareholders, which is you have given up your life for money. As a CEO, we all know it, we all get it. You're getting the big paycheck, and in exchange for that, you've given up your weekends, you've given up your evenings, you've given up your family life, you've given up everything that you thought was important, that mattered to you most, and frankly, it is what matters to you most. You've given up your life, and you're beholden to that paycheck. And it sucks. But you've been walking through your life with the aspiration of becoming a CEO. You finally get there. You think you have all of this organizational power. And the reality is your power is limited. And you have to really think about, how am I going to use that power? And you have to be judicious about it. And you have to really use your influence. And that's really where you get organizational power, is through your influence, not the authority that you have. But you have to fundamentally accept that without knowing it, I blindly walked into this role as a CEO for that paycheck. I had all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of ideas about what I was getting, and I didn't think about what I was giving up. And I would encourage each of you to really reflect on, what have you given up? It's not just your weekends, it's not just your evenings. How much of your soul have you given up? And what's that price? And how do you change it? Most importantly, how do you change it? What are you willing to do? What kinds of conversations are you willing to have with your boards of directors? What kinds of conversations are you willing to have with your leadership team? Because you're templating for them the kind of behavior that you want and expect from them. You've created an organizational culture and environment that you own. You've created this thing and the people who work for you. And are you getting what you wanted? Is the organization getting what it wants? Are the employees who are showing up, are they living the life that they want to live? You have a responsibility as a leader to be conscious, to wake up, to be aware of the life you're living, and to say, is this right? Is this what the world needs? Is this what I need? Is this what my family needs? Is this what the society that I live in, the community I live and work in, is this what they need? I suspect not. We know not. We know that there is a better way. You can look in the mirror. You can see your life, the life that you're living. And I would be very surprised that you're happy with it. In all of the CEO coaching work I've been doing for over the last 10 plus years, what I hear over and over and over and over and over again from every one of the clients I've worked with is how lonely they are. They've got stuff that they can't bring to their board of directors because their board is going to say, we got to get rid of this guy or this woman. They're not competent. They can't bring it to their subordinates because they all want their job. They can't bring it home to their partner because the last thing their partner wants to hear is more shit about what's going on in the workplace. So where do you go? What's your outlet? What do you do with this emotion, these thoughts, these ideas? What's happening for you? You stuff it down and you ask for another pay raise. You ask for more stock options. You ask for more stock because you're miserable. It's not worth it. So it's part of the reason why I've been coaching for so many years is to be that vehicle, that outlet, that relief valve for the CEOs that I'm working with, is to have a confidential, trusting, safe environment to talk about what really matters to them. And I would encourage each of you to find that outlet, to find somebody or some bodies, perhaps it's a group of colleagues, to get together on a regular basis to release that pressure, to allow yourself to have clarity of thought, to really honestly process what's going on inside. Because if you don't, then you're reflecting back to your subordinates, you're reflecting back to your board, you're reflecting back to the people who work for you a behavior that's not healthy. And it's not helpful. And it will drag down the organization over time. And it will destroy your health over time. And it's really simple. It's developing personal, human interaction, connection with somebody or some bodies where it's safe. And in doing so, and having that sense of safety, you develop a sense of trust. And with that sense of trust, then it's safe for other people. And all of a sudden your subordinates feel like it's okay to come to you and tell you the information that they've been reluctant to tell you. People in the US 120 years ago, 95% of Americans were working on the family farm. There was only 5% of the US population that was working in what we think of as the work, in a retail shop, if there was a bank in the town, if there was a school in a town, a library. People weren't working in the way that we think about work. It's actually something that's a very contemporary concept, that we're working and we think of work as sitting behind a desk, sitting at a keyboard, doing whatever we do in terms of interacting with customers. That's a new concept. That's a whole new reality of work. And when we think back to the last century and the transformation that happened over that 100 years, it was profound for each of us as human beings. So in that moment, we have an opportunity to recognize, do I need to be in fight mode? Do I need to be in flight mode? Do I need to be in freeze mode? Or can I actually take a breath, pause, and provide a measured response to the information I've been collecting, that my body has received? And in that moment, we can respond in a way that we would be happy to look back at and say, boy, I'm really glad I responded as opposed to what I really wanted to do. And it makes it safe for the people who are working for us. And it creates a trusting environment. And so if you think about every single person who works for you, every single one of those people, they're not just employees. They're not just people on the payroll. They're human beings. They show up every day. They're volunteering. Yes, you pay them, but they're volunteers. And they can choose to go volunteer someplace else. And that's not what you want. You want them staying with you. And part of the way they're going to stay and show up as their best selves is by you responding rather than reacting. And in so doing, they don't just stay and work for you. They don't just say good things about you in the place where you're working, but they actually want to go over and above and serve you and the organization. And with that service, they become amazing ambassadors for your company, for your brand, in the marketplace. That is absolutely priceless. You can't buy that level of service and ambassadors. It's incredible. And it starts with just a really simple thing of, I'm going to consciously respond to stimuli with my human brain, as opposed to reacting from my reptilian brain. We've all evolved. So I'd love to invite a couple of folks up from the audience to just, let's do an exercise. Because it's not just reacting in terms of what we say. We actually energetically, we can feel. We've all experienced it. We can feel what somebody's thinking. We can feel the emotions they're experiencing. Our body is like a major receiver, and we're feeling that long before any words come out. We know it, whether we know the person or not, a stranger or otherwise. We get a sense of what's going on with them. And if we piss them off, we know it. If we made them happy, we know it.